So let's just start with introductions. Who would like to do this bit from VOR? So just tell us in 100 words about VOR and what you do.
Business is Value Optimised Retrofit. We started our journey with Bristol City Leap when they were looking for retrofit coordinators to help them deliver their LAD scheme for their local residents back in 2021. And since then, we've grown into a retrofit consultancy that's delivering all sorts of retrofit consultancy advice, whether that be delivering retrofit assessments, retrofit coordination, retrofit design, monitoring, evaluation, and then also helping clients with sort of commercial delivery and retrofit under PAS 2038.
Okay, fantastic. And could you tell us, from your perspective, what Bristol City Leap is?
So Bristol City Leap is a partnership between Amoresco and Bristol City Council to deliver their decarbonisation agenda across their housing and commercial stock across the city. They've also got Vattenfall as a partner, who are also delivering heat networks across the city as well.
So we were approached by Bristol City Leap, where we had a working sort of relationship previously, to competitively tender for the project. The project information, tender documentation came out, of which we reviewed. It became very clear very early on that it was a retrofit scale project, heavily archetyped in the sense that it was duplication of housing stock, house type flats, arranged over blocks of 4 units in a standalone block. So we reviewed the clients' intended outcomes, were successful in our bid, and appointed to take the project through the various stages of PAS 2035.
Okay, so fulfilling all the roles.
Correct. Yes.
Okay. So the assessment, the coordination, the design.
Yes, it was the client specifically wanted a turnkey solution, sort of end-to-end services under the same consultant.
So just to give you a bit of background into that, David, Amoresco, as part of the JV or how they've structured themselves with Bristol City Council, they are effectively a building contractor as well. So what the way that was structured was that Bristol City Leap was sort of like the main contractor for the project. Bristol City are the client, and they procure all of the individual contractors, if that makes sense, all the installers, and then they procured us to manage the process and support them with the process in terms of all the. I mean, we've jointly worked together on the resident engagement, for example, but basically it's between us as the coordinators, the assessors and designers, and Amoresco as the City Leap delivery partner that deliver the project for Bristol City Council.
We utilised the Bristol archives to find all the original construction information for the properties. So there's an awful lot of, in terms of identification of the stock. At Google Maps, it was very apparent that they were very typical archetyped properties.
Okay.
There are actually thousands of them across the city, or
Right.
I'll say hundreds across the city, and they are one of the biggest challenges they had was identifying the blocks that were solely Bristol City Council owned. So the right to buy scheme has obviously resulted in numerous of these blocks of 4 units where one or more of the units may be privately owned. So that became a challenge. So they were specifically targeting the solely Bristol City Council owned blocks.
Okay, fantastic. Let's talk a bit about the properties themselves. So Lang Easiform. Now, just I can sort of picture what I think that is, but paint a picture for us. Perhaps is Tiziana able to do this bit?
Yeah.
To sort of tell us about the properties and what is a Lang Easiform home. What does it look like, and how does it work?
Yeah, so an Easiform house is a property that typically were getting built after the Second World War. So it was as a result of a need for housing stock. They just started having all these competitions all around the country for quick housing to be built. So the properties are built mainly in concrete, so it's to leaves of concrete, which are made usually stacking up different sort of would you call it, planks, I'd say.
Cast in situ.
Cast in situ, yeah, concrete. So the shattering will move up every 600 mil or so. So as Phil mentioned earlier, we did an exercise of going to the Bristol archives and found how exactly these properties were made, because there were subtle differences between the different contractors doing different types of Easiforms and different parts of the country. So we got hold of the documents for the ones in these streets, and then we were able to define what kind of measures were actually applicable to the homes.
Tiz and Phil, talk us through the approach to archetyping and energy modelling that you took.
Phil, if you're going to go through that, I think the surveys need to cover really are the fact that we did a measured building survey because we would archetype them as well. So we did that, and also we did a constraint survey on the rear of the property, like eaves, extensions, and all of that jazz. And then obviously the first ones are more in depth, but obviously as we were repeating with the archetypes, they actually did reduce in time.
So once we'd obviously established it was an archetype-led scheme, we instructed a full measured building survey of an entire block. So we had internal, external LiDAR survey of an entire block. That then enabled us to produce a base plan, essentially, for the archetype design to be developed around. I think one of the significant efficiencies that we managed to achieve. So whilst the program for retrofit assessments over 112 homes is a timely process, that was programmed in with the best intentions. Obviously cancellations, no access, etc., sort of feeds into that. So that's quite a lengthy process. But right from the outset, once we had our hands on the measured building survey, we were able to pre-populate an awful lot of the retrofit assessment data, window sizes, room sizes, etc. So the actual on-site requirement for the retrofit surveys was significantly reduced. Because we knew these were archetype properties, we furnished our assessors with obviously a floor plan, the window dimensions, radiator locations, sizes, etc. And one of the instructions there, one of the key factors there, was to identify anything that was property specific as part of a retrofit assessment to meet the requirements of the full retrofit assessment, but actually to also be mindful of any deviations away from the archetype, which I think, if I'm being from a fabric perspective, I think one of the units, one of the ground floor flats, had the kitchen window removed and replaced with a pair of patio doors. So that property was then immediately, obviously, a set of drawings were produced identifying all of those constraints so that could be sent over to the installer, so they were fully aware of what constraints they might be. I think Tiziana touched upon one where there was a potential access issue between it was an existing garage and the external wall of the house. Or of the flat rather, any external wall insulation would narrow that already tight gap, and I think it was determined by the width of the wheelie bin. There was a technical solution to that, but that was identified as part of the external constraints. So
yeah. So in terms of the assessments being delivered, once you're doing the initial first property and the second property, really is trying to capture as much information as you can. So that's probably taking 4 hours in the property and liaising with the resident in terms of their property, what their intended outcomes are. But as you go through the process and you've got the measured building survey, you've got the previous technical information, you've got it all preloaded effectively before you get there, you can get significant efficiencies, and that allows you more time as an assessor. So you might be half the time to actually do it because you're not having to capture the raw data, but that gives you the opportunity then to liaise with the tenant and understand what their needs are and what their intended outcomes are and what challenges they might have.
So we've carried out the archetype surveys. You've got a really sensible approach on the retrofit assessments. You've got all the data you need by the sounds of it. 2 questions. What did that tell you that you didn't think was the case? Okay, would be the first one. So what was your big revelation? Okay, and the second one is, how did that feed through to the improved option evaluation and the medium-term retrofit plan? What did you change in those as a result of the data that you found?
I think the retrofit assessment and really provided a validation of what we expected to find. But the key bits of information that were critical for this scheme was the archive information and the original building information that was obtained from the archives. Because rather than having to guess, rather than drilling holes and doing boroscoping, rather than trying to do thermal bridge calculations and cameras, we had all of the base information, and all we were doing when we were on site was validating those construction drawings, and knowing what was built there or what should have been built there was just a big difference compared to a lot of our other schemes where you turn up, you look at it, and then you go, right, we've got to try and figure out what's being done here. So that sort of initial research was critical, really, in terms
presumably
of
in terms of defects and alterations that have been made over the course of the last 70 or 80 years. There must have been quite a broad range.
They were actually really limited. I think we were fortunate. They were very limited on this project. We're working on the next project with the same client across house types rather than flats, and they vary significantly and have been adapted over the years. But these are they're very small units. Within reason, there's very little that can be altered. So yeah, we have been fortunate in that sense.
Okay.
Yeah. The windows were
windows
and doors. Windows and doors, sorry, were probably the two that things that got changed throughout the years. But yeah, the archive drawings were very good to see also all the junctions and like whether there was like linters above, what the linters were above windows and doors. There was a canopy. How was the canopy attached to the walls as well?
So effectively, the assessment provided validation. The plans that you'd drawn up in your head, as in the option evaluation, it sort of again just validated what but you had peace of mind, presumably, that you got all the data, the plans, your assumptions you'd made were correct, and therefore your design solution's going to work.
Yeah, and I think the key message is as much research and as much assessment data you can capture, the easier it is to move through those stages. So we didn't rush to get on and do the design before we fully understood the building. Once we knew the assessments were complete, we knew that we got the measured building survey, we had the relevant information, we could actually move on with confidence, knowing that we're actually unlikely to have to then go back and adjust what we designed.
Let's talk about, so we've got the plans, we've got the designs, you're in a good place, and then we get into install. Did you say the installer were effectively subcontracted to a Nesco? Is that what you said earlier? I think it was.
They're a PAS 2030 installer Amoresco are like the main contractor, and they subcontracted to a PAS 2030 installer for each of the individual measures.
Okay, was that a local firm?
Pretty much they're all local. They've all got the same accents as some of us.
Okay. So earlier, Phil, you were again a point we're really keen to reinforce around site visits. Were you doing toolbox talks, all that sort of stuff?
Yeah, so the pilot homes that we looked at, the pilot properties, were just invaluable. We spent relative to the rest of the properties a disproportionate amount of time focusing on the detail around those particular properties, and that was with all the various installers, and we were looking at the various sequencing. I think there was so things were identified as we were on those pilot properties, an example being an existing precast concrete sill for the windows. So we looked at the options of removing that sill, cutting that sill off, removing it entirely just wasn't feasible because the integrity of the wall around. Cutting it off was, a particular challenge. So we looked at details around how we could retain it in situ, reduce the insulation locally around it, ensure that thermal bridging, we pass all the required sort of modelling, which we did. But it flushed out so many challenges, and that we knew were going to be replicable. So that was the key factor, that all of these challenges were replicable. And as I mentioned earlier, we purposely picked what we thought were going to be the most challenging from the outset. And I think, we regular site meetings with the various installers for the various measures in the early stages, and then Yes, I mean, we probably didn't necessarily introduce them as toolbox talks, but they were exactly that. So the main contractor were there because they obviously had a responsibility to coordinate the individual trades. Obviously, the individual trades installers were there for their PAS 2030 accredited measures, and we were there for sort of an overview and a coordination of that whole process. So that was the retrofit coordinator, myself, Tiziana. So we spent a lot of time in those early stages, and obviously what that's enabled us to do is take a bit of a backward step in terms of challenging and addressing technical challenges, but rather than just being an observation, sort of site visits, or more observation now and quality, rather than technical challenges.
Okay, what do you think the worst case scenario may have been had you not done that, and we'd have had these famous pajama coordinators running this project that never leave their bedroom, let alone visit the site?
Well, we could have potentially got a long way down the line and then realised that when the seasons change and the heating comes on and we've got unintended consequences left, right and centre. Or one of my particular bugbears is that we'd have just had EWI wrapped around constraints. I think we mentioned the gas pipes, liaising with utilities from a very early stage stopped us having 2 stop beads either side of a vertical gas pipe, or indeed a gas pipe owned by utilities being moved.
Okay.
When
And
do you think that would have happened?
Yes.
And
we just see it all the time. One of my favourite lines is, "Oh, we've always done it that way," which terrifies me.
Also, it's good. It's that the installers know that we're going to visit the site, and they know that we're going to have a check, and we don't sit there and just write a long list of what they've done incorrectly. We actually sat there trying to help solve what these issues are, and checking how many fixings they're putting into the wall, into the insulation in the wall. They're often asked, "Blimey, you go into a lot of detail, don't you?" But they're all. I guess that provides confidence for the client as well, that they know they're getting a high quality installation rather than it's just installed, and all you see, especially with measures like EWIs, you'll just see the final render. You don't actually know what's behind it, and obviously they've got the confidence that that is being checked and inspected, and there's inspection and test plans for how that works.
Yeah, great. Tiz, you got anything to add on that, or is that?
Yeah, no. I think something to consider is that communication has been very key throughout the whole project. So we've been all the team from the client side, installers and the lead contractor have been quite good at just communicating with each other, being frank about situations and trying to solve problems together instead of fighting or starting going to legal about contracts and stuff. So it's good.
Can I give you?
Do you think that those companies have learned a lot through that process?
Yeah,
and will be able to take those back forward into the future.
Yeah, and they've also been, there's other projects that we're working with the same client, and we're developing the collaboration, and they have new projects coming through as well. So yeah.
So the question is, what approach are you taking to monitoring and evaluating the project?
So there's not a requirement, there's not a specific client requirement beyond the requirements of PAS 2035. So it's basic monitoring and evaluation, which will be a resident based questionnaire. I think obviously, should any of the intended outcomes not be met, or there be any concerns raised by the residents as a result of that basic monitoring and evaluation, we'll then move on to the next phase, which would be sort of investigative and intermediate monitoring and evaluation. And then obviously, if there's as a result of whatever that may uncover, there'll be a process put in place to sort of remediate that, whether that be a technical solution, or otherwise. Time will tell on that, but at this stage we're sort of data gathering, but we will be following the PAS requirements of basic monitoring and evaluation at the first instance.
Just to add into that, because future phases as well are being delivered in the same communities, actually the presence in that area is still there from the client, from Bristol City Leap, and from ourselves. So those residents still see us even during their post-installation periods.
Yeah.
So if that makes sense, they'll be seeing us for the next year and probably the foreseeable 2 or 3 years in that
Yeah.
community delivering retrofit. So it's not an approach where we do the installation and then the whole client team move off and go and do a home 20 miles down the road. This is the same team delivering the same properties over a number of years. So I think that fills the residents with quite a lot of confidence that they know the individuals and those individuals are working still on homes in their communities.
Yeah, brilliant, guys. It's brilliant. I think you haven't needed to do a sales job, because what you're saying speaks for itself.